She was just a housekeeper until someone from her past came hunting her. Now, the most dangerous man on the East Coast is risking everything to protect her, and what he's about to uncover could destroy them both. Will secrets, obsession, and a city full of power stop them or ignite a war? The clock on the wall read 11:30 p.m. Jae-Hyun Park sat alone in complete suffocating darkness. The only light in the penthouse came from the electric glow of the skyline through the floor to ceiling windows behind him, framing his silhouette against the sprawling glass. 60 floors below, buzzed with a life he controlled but rarely joined. Yellow taxis crawled through the grid like ants, and couples walked hand in hand toward late-night bistros. But up here, the silence was so heavy, it felt like a physical weight. Jae-Hyun Park sat on the black leather couch, legs spread wide, elbows resting on his knees. A cigarette burned between his fingers, the smoke curling upward into the shadows, like an unsaid thought. He wore an all-black shirt, unbuttoned halfway down his chest, to reveal the intricate tattoos that crawled up his neck and across his skin like armor. Each mark was a story of survival, all a tally of the things he had endured to reach the top. He checked his luxury metal watch for the 5th time in 20 minutes. Where was she? He took a long drag, letting the smoke fill his lungs while his jaw tightened. His eyes were fixed on the front door, like a predator waiting for prey to walk into a trap. Jae-Hyun was not a patient man. As the head of the Orion Tower, he commanded fear and respect. Men trembled at his name, and women threw themselves at his feet. But right now, the most dangerous man on the East Coast was sitting in the dark, obsessed with the arrival of Amara Cole, the new employee. The city never slept, but Jae-Hyun Park had learned to listen to its silences. Tonight, the silence was wrong. He sat in the darkness of his penthouse, 15 stories above the glittering chaos of Midtown Manhattan, watching the minutes bleed past midnight. His Patek Philippe caught fragments of light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. 11:47 p.m. She was late, 17 minutes late. For most people, 17 minutes meant nothing. Traffic, a delayed train, a forgotten errand. But Amara Cole had never been late. Not once in the 8 months she'd worked for him. Precision was her religion. Routine was her armor. And now that armor had cracked, and Jae-Hyun couldn't ignore the cold knot tightening in his chest, he took a slow sip of whiskey, expensive enough to fund a small family's year, and tasted nothing. The leather chair beneath him was Italian, custom-made, designed for men who controlled empires. But tonight, it felt like a prison. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened glass. Sharp jaw, perfectly tailored suit even at this hour. Eyes that had watched men beg for mercy and felt nothing. Those same eyes now tracked the entrance to his penthouse like a predator, waiting for prey. Except he wasn't hunting. He was waiting. And that distinction terrified him more than he'd ever admit. The Orion Tower was a monument to wealth that didn't ask questions. 73 floors of steel and silence, where billionaires and criminals often shared the same tax bracket. Jae-Hyun owned the top floor, all 6,000 square feet of it. Marble from Carrara, art from private auctions where the pieces never got catalogued, security systems that could detect a heartbeat through walls. He'd built this fortress to keep the world out. So why did it feel so suffocating when one person wasn't inside it? His phone sat face down on the obsidian coffee table. No calls, No texts. He'd trained himself never to reach out first, never to show need. Need was weakness. Weakness was death. His father had taught him that, with fists and cigarette burns, before a rival syndicate put a bullet in the old man's skull. Jae-Hyun had been 19 then. 20 years later, he'd become everything his father had been, and worse. The Park Dominion didn't just control shipping routes and underground casinos anymore. They owned politicians, judges, entire precincts. Blood money laundered so clean, it funded children's hospitals. Violence so surgical, it looked like accidents. Welcome to Afro-Korean TV stories, the place for dramatic, emotional, and heart-touching stories you'll love. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. And yet, here he was, watching the clock like a lovesick teenager. 11:51 p.m. He stood abruptly, the motion too sharp, too revealing. The whiskey glass remained on the table, condensation pooling around its base like tiny failures. He moved to the window, hands sliding into his pockets with practiced ease. The posture of a man who owned everything he surveyed. Below, Manhattan sprawled in its electric glory. Taxis like blood cells pumping through concrete arteries. Buildings competing to touch a sky they'd never reach. From up here, people were insects. Problems were distant. Control was absolute. Except he couldn't control the sound of his own breathing. Slightly faster than it should be. The penthouse was too quiet. His staff knew better than to linger past 9 unless summoned. Victor usually called by now with updates. Which shipment arrived? Which councilman needed convincing? Which body needed disappearing? But Jae-Hyun had told him not to call tonight. He'd wanted the silence. He'd wanted to hear the front door open. Hear her footsteps on the marble. Hear her soft voice saying, "Good evening, Mr. Park," in that careful, measured way that never quite met his eyes. Amara Cole had arrived 8 months ago through an agency that specialized in discretion. No family, no social media footprint. References so vague they barely qualified as references. Any sane person would have dismissed her application immediately. Jae-Hyun had hired her within 5 minutes of their interview, not because she was beautiful, though she was. Dark skin like polished mahogany. Natural hair she kept in a simple bun. Features that belonged in museums instead of cleaning them. Not because she was qualified, though her resume suggested competence in ways that felt almost military. He'd hired her because when he'd asked why she wanted the position, she'd looked directly at him. The first person in years to hold his gaze without flinching, and said, "Because I need to disappear." No one who worked for Jae-Hyun Park ever disappeared. They either ascended or they died. But something in her voice, some fracture beneath the composure, had intrigued him. So he'd given her the job, set her up in the small studio apartment 2 floors down, and watched her transform his penthouse into something almost livable. She never asked questions, never gossiped with the security team, never looked at the locked rooms or the men who visited in the dark hours, smelling of gunpowder and desperation. She simply cleaned, cooked when he requested it, and vanished into her routines with the precision of someone who understood that invisibility was survival. Until tonight. 11:56 p.m. Jae-Hyun's jaw tightened. His phone buzzed. A text from Victor. "Need you to sign off on the Baltimore shipment. Customs is asking questions." He ignored it. Baltimore could wait. The entire eastern seaboard could wait. Right now, the only question that mattered was, Where the hell was Amara? And why did her absence feel like a wound he couldn't cauterize? He'd been in firefights that left him calmer than this. The sound came at 11:58. A keycard sliding through the reader. The subtle click of the lock disengaging. Jae-Hyun didn't turn from the window. Didn't let his shoulders drop in relief. Instead, he took a breath, counted to 3, and listened. Her footsteps were quieter than usual. She moved through the entryway with the careful deliberation of someone trying not to disturb a sleeping beast. Jae-Hyun caught her reflection in the window. A ghost of movement, shoulders slightly hunched, head down. Wrong. Everything about her posture was wrong. Amara carried herself like a dancer, even with a vacuum cleaner. Spine straight, chin level. The kind of bearing that came from years of holding yourself together when everything inside was falling apart. But tonight, she looked diminished, tired, human in ways she usually refused to be. He waited 5 more seconds before turning, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. When he finally faced her, his expression was neutral. The mask he wore when negotiating with men who thought they could lie to him. "You're late." Amara stood near the entrance, her coat still on, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second before dropping to somewhere near his chest. "I apologize, Mr. Park. The subway had delays. Signal problems at... You don't take the subway." His voice was quiet, factual, cutting through her explanation like a scalpel. "You walk. 32 minutes from your apartment building to here. You've done it every night for 8 months. Rain, snow, heat. 32 minutes. It's 11:58. That makes you 46 minutes late." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe fear, definitely calculation. She was deciding how much truth to give him. He'd seen that expression on countless faces right before they decided whether to confess or die lying. But on her, it looked different. Sadder. Like she'd expected this moment, but hoped it wouldn't come so soon. "I stopped somewhere," she said finally, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. She was still holding the bag too tightly, knuckles pressing against the canvas. "It won't happen again." "Where?" "That's personal, Mr. Park." The audacity of it almost made him smile. Almost. In his world, nothing was personal. Privacy was a luxury purchased with power, and she had none. He could have her followed, her phone cloned, her entire life dissected and catalogued by morning. One call to Victor, and he'd know everywhere she'd been tonight, everyone she'd spoken to, every secret she thought she was keeping. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she stood there, defiant despite the exhaustion carved into her features. Maybe it was the fact that she hadn't lied, hadn't invented some elaborate story. She'd simply drawn a line and dared him to cross it. He crossed the room slowly, each step measured, watching her body language for signs of retreat. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there with that bag clutched against her ribs like a shield. When he was close enough to catch the faint scent of rain and something floral, her shampoo maybe, he stopped. They were the same height when she stood this straight. Her eyes were lighter up close, brown with flecks of amber that caught the city lights bleeding through the windows. "Do you know what I do, Amara?" "You run businesses, Mr. Park." "I run an empire, built on information. On knowing things before other people know I know them. On understanding motivations, patterns, weaknesses." He tilted his head slightly, studying her the way a collector might examine a painting with a suspicious provenance. You've worked in my home for 8 months. You've seen documents left on my desk, heard phone conversations, walked past meetings where men discuss things that could put them in prison or in the ground. And not once have you asked a question. Not once have you shown curiosity. That's either extraordinary discipline or extraordinary fear. Maybe it's extraordinary indifference, she said softly. Not everyone wants to know everything, Mr. Park. Some of us just want to get through the day, and today was difficult to get through. Her jaw tightened. For a moment, he thought she might actually tell him. He could see the words forming behind her eyes, some truth clawing its way up her throat. But then she swallowed it down, reset her expression, and became the housekeeper again. Polite, professional, impenetrable. I'll make sure it doesn't affect my work. If you'll excuse me, I should put my things away and begin. Take the night off. She blinked, genuinely startled. Mr. Park? You're exhausted. Whatever you stop to do, it drained you. I don't need someone cleaning at midnight who can barely stand. He stepped back, giving her space, trying to ignore how much he wanted to close the distance again. Go to your apartment. Sleep. Come back tomorrow at your usual time. I'm fine. Really. I can. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. That wasn't a request. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, sharp enough that she actually flinched. He watched her face close off completely, every trace of vulnerability vanishing behind walls that probably took years to build. She nodded once, a quick jerk of her chin, and turned toward the door. Amara. She paused, hand on the doorframe, not looking back. If something is wrong, he said carefully, each word chosen with the precision of a man defusing a bomb. If someone is bothering you or threatening you, you can tell me. I have resources. I can make problems disappear. I know exactly what you can make disappear, Mr. Park. Her voice was so quiet, he almost missed it. That's not the kind of help I need. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that felt like a judgment. Jae-Hyun stood in the sudden silence, staring at the space where she'd been, feeling something unfamiliar clawing at his chest. Concern. Actual, genuine concern for another human being. It had been so long since he'd felt it that he almost didn't recognize the sensation. He'd trained himself to see people as assets or obstacles, resources to exploit, or threats to eliminate. Emotions were inefficiencies. Attachments were vulnerabilities. His therapist, Dr. Elias Rowan, who charged $500 an hour to listen to monsters justify their monstrosities, had once suggested that Jae-Hyun might be incapable of forming genuine human connections. Jae-Hyun had considered that a compliment. But now, standing alone in his fortress of marble and money, he wondered if the good doctor had been wrong. Because this feeling, twisting through his ribs, this desperate need to know what had put that haunted look in Amara's eyes, this rage at whoever or whatever had hurt her, this felt uncomfortably like caring. And in his world, caring was the fastest way to get someone killed. Jae-Hyun didn't sleep. He spent the next 3 hours in his office, a room most people never saw, making calls that couldn't wait and reviewing contracts signed in blood and legal jargon. But his mind kept drifting 2 floors down, to a small studio apartment where Amara was probably lying awake in the dark. carrying whatever weight had bent her shoulders tonight. At 3 a.m., he poured himself another drink he wouldn't taste and made a decision that would have horrified his younger, more ruthless self. He called Victor. "It's 3 in the morning," Victor answered, his voice rough with interrupted sleep or interrupted pleasure. With Victor, it could be either. Someone better be dead, or about to be. "I need a background check. Deep. Everything." "On who?" Papers rustled in the background. Victor was already awake now. Already working. 20 years of loyalty had taught him when Jae-Hyun's tone meant business. One of the new distributors. The city councilman asking too many questions. Amara Cole. Silence stretched across the line, heavy with implications. Jae-Hyun could practically hear Victor's thoughts rearranging themselves, connecting dots that shouldn't connect, drawing conclusions that were probably correct. Victor Hale had been with him since the beginning, since they were both street-level enforcers with more ambition than sense. They'd built the park dominion together, one calculated risk at a time. Victor knew him better than anyone alive, which also made him the most dangerous person in Jae-Hyun's orbit. "The housekeeper," Victor said finally, his tone carefully neutral. "Any particular reason?" "She was late tonight, acting strange. I want to know why." "Strange how?" "That's what you're going to find out." Jae-Hyun moved to the window again, watching the city's late-night ballet of garbage trucks and desperate people pull everything. Real name, previous addresses, employment history, criminal record if she has one. I want to know who she was before she became invisible. Jay. Victor only used his first name when they were alone, when the performance of power could drop for a moment. "You know what this sounds like, right? You know what you're doing?" "Background check. Standard procedure. We do them on everyone. We did hers 8 months ago, clean as they come. No red flags. And now you're asking again because she was late." Victor exhaled slowly, the sound of a man choosing his words carefully. "This isn't about security. This is about just do it." Jae-Hyun's voice dropped to the register that ended conversations. "I want a full report by noon. Everything she's hiding, I want it on my desk. And if she's not hiding anything, if she just had a bad day like normal people do?" "Nobody working for me is normal people, Victor. You know that better than anyone." He ended the call before Victor could push further, before the questions could carve too close to truths Jae-Hyun wasn't ready to examine. The rest of the night crawled past with excruciating slowness. He tried to work, reviewing the Baltimore shipment details, approving the bribe amount for the customs inspector, who'd suddenly developed a conscience. Oh, 15,000 in cash, delivered in a briefcase to a storage unit in Dundalk. Simple. Clean. The kind of transaction he'd orchestrated hundreds of times. But tonight, the numbers blurred. His concentration fractured. Every sound in the penthouse made him look up, expecting her to walk through the door even though he'd sent her away. At 6 a.m., dawn began its slow burn across the Manhattan skyline, turning glass towers into pillars of gold and blood. Jae-Hyun stood under the shower, water scalding enough to hurt, trying to wash away the feeling that he'd crossed some invisible line tonight. Some boundary between employer and something else. Something dangerous. By 8 a.m., he was dressed in a different suit, charcoal grey this time, reviewing security footage on his tablet. The building's cameras covered every entrance, every hallway, every elevator. He found Amara's return last night at 11:47, watched her walk through the lobby with that altered posture, head down, bag clutched tight. She'd nodded to the night security guard, Marcus, former Marine, clean record, and gone straight to the elevator. Nothing unusual, no one following her, no visible injuries, just exhaustion and something else he couldn't name. He rewound the footage, watched it again, then again, looking for clues in the way she moved, the set of her shoulders, the micro expressions that crossed her face when she thought no one was watching. This was obsession. He recognized it clinically, the way a doctor might diagnose his own disease. Jae-Hyun had built an empire on controlled obsession, with power, with perfection, with eliminating any variable that threatened his dominance. But this was different. This was personal in ways that made his carefully constructed world feel unstable. At 11:30 a.m., Victor arrived unannounced, which meant the news was either very good or very bad. He walked into Jae-Hyun's office, carrying a thin folder, his expression unreadable. Victor was 42, built like a boxer, gone slightly soft, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the violence underneath. Right now, those eyes held something that looked uncomfortably like concern. "You're not going to like this," Victor said, dropping the folder on the desk. Jae-Hyun picked it up, flipped it open. The first page was a photocopy of a driver's license from Illinois. The picture showed a younger version of Amara. Same face, different name. Amara Cole. Chicago address from 6 years ago. He kept reading. Employment, records from a law firm in the Loop, graduate degree from Northwestern. Everything clean, professional, normal. Then the records just stopped. 3 years ago, Amara Cole had vanished completely. No credit cards, no tax returns, no digital footprint. 6 months later, Amara Cole had appeared in Baltimore with forged references and a past scrubbed so thoroughly it screamed professional help. "Someone helped her disappear," Jae-Hyun said quietly. "Witness protection? FBI? Deeper than that." Victor settled into the chair across from him, the leather creaking under his weight. "I called in favors from our contact at the bureau. She's not in any federal database. No witness protection, no informant registry, nothing. Whoever erased her did it privately. Expensive. The kind of expensive that suggests she was running from something big. Or someone." "Yeah." Victor leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fixing Jae-Hyun with a look that demanded honesty. "The question is, why do you care? We've employed people with worse secrets. Hell, half our organization is built on people running from their past. What makes her different?" Jae-Hyun closed the folder, his fingers resting on the image of her younger self. In the photo, she was smiling. Actually smiling. Genuine and unguarded. The kind of expression he'd never seen on her face. Whatever had happened between that smile and now had carved the light out of her. And something about that transformation made his chest tight with an anger he couldn't direct at anyone yet. "She was late," he said finally, knowing it sounded absurd, knowing Victor would see right through it. "I want to know why." Victor stared at him for a long moment, the kind of silence that spoke volumes between men who'd survived too much together to bother with polite lies. Then he shook his head slowly, something between pity and warning in his expression. "You're making a mistake. Whatever this is, whoever she is to you now, it's going to compromise everything we've built. She's my housekeeper, nothing more." Then why are we sitting here at noon discussing her college transcripts like she's a security threat? Victor stood, pacing to the window, his reflection overlapping with the city beyond. I've known you for 20 years, Jay. I watched you put a bullet in your own cousin when he stole from us. I've seen you negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking. You don't feel things. You calculate them. But this woman has you running background checks because she came home late. He turned back, and his expression was harder now. The loyal soldier giving way to the strategic mind that made him invaluable. That's not calculation. That's attachment. And attachment gets people killed. Are you finished? No. Victor crossed his arms. And suddenly, Jae-Hyun could see the boy. He'd been Southside Chicago. Father in prison, mother working 3 jobs to keep them fed. They'd met in juvie, both 15, both already carved into shapes the world had needed them to be. There's something else. Last night, around 11, our surveillance picked up a tail on her. Professional job. They stayed back, kept their distance, but they were tracking her movements. Every muscle in Jae-Hyun's body went rigid. Who? Still working on it. White woman, late 30s, expensive clothes but trying to look casual. She followed Amara from a coffee shop in Hell's Kitchen all the way to within 2 blocks of here, then peeled off. Knew exactly where our camera coverage started. Victor pulled out his phone, swiped through some images, then held it out. Recognize her? The photo was grainy, pulled from a street camera, but clear enough. Blonde hair, angular features, the kind of sharp beauty that came from good genetics and better cosmetic work. She was standing on a corner, phone to her ear, eyes tracking something off camera. Professional, patient, dangerous. Never seen her, Jae-Hyun said, but his mind was already racing through possibilities. Someone from Amara's past. Someone who knew what she'd been running from. Someone who'd found her, despite the expensive erasure. I want her identified. Full workup. And I want to know if she's working alone, or if she's part of something bigger. Already on it. I've got Kang running facial recognition through our databases, checking with our contacts in private security. But Jay... Victor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. If this woman is hunting Amara, and Amara is living in your building, working in your home, then whatever she's running from is now your problem too. Maybe it's time to cut her loose. Give her severance. Help her relocate somewhere far from here, and let whatever past she's carrying chase her somewhere else. The suggestion was logical, strategic. Exactly what Jae-Hyun would have advised if the situation were reversed. His empire was built on ruthless pragmatism, on eliminating variables before they became problems. Amara was becoming a problem. The smart move was obvious. No, he said quietly. We protect her. Victor's expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, concern, resignation. You're serious. She works for me. That means she's under my protection. Anyone coming after her is coming after what's mine. The words felt strange in his mouth. The possessiveness both foreign and startlingly natural. Find out who that woman is. Find out what she wants. And make it clear that Amara Cole is off limits. And if what she wants is Amara herself, if this is personal, not business. Victor moved back to the desk, planting his hands on the surface, leaning in. If we go to war protecting your housekeeper, people will ask questions. The family heads. Our distributors. everyone in this ecosystem who depends on you being rational and cold. They'll see weakness. They'll see a man making decisions with his heart instead of his head. And that's when the shark starts circling. Then we make sure they're too afraid to circle. Jae-Hyun stood, buttoning his jacket, slipping back into the armor of absolute authority. I want round-the-clock surveillance on Amara. Discreet. She doesn't know. She doesn't notice. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she talks to. And I want that blonde woman found before the sun sets. Use whatever resources necessary. Victor nodded slowly, accepting the orders, even as his expression said he thought this was suicide. You're the boss. But for what it's worth, I think you should talk to Dr. Rowan. Whatever this is, it's affecting your judgment. My judgment is fine. Your judgment just authorized a protective detail for a woman whose real name you learned an hour ago. Victor grabbed the folder, heading for the door, then paused at the threshold. One more thing. That coffee shop where the tail picked her up, it's not on her normal route. She went out of her way to go there, which means she was meeting someone, or picking something up, or doing something she didn't want us to know about. Might want to ask yourself why your housekeeper is keeping secrets, and whether those secrets are worth dying for. Then he was gone, leaving Jae-Hyun alone with implications that multiplied like viruses. He looked down at the folder again, at the smiling face of Amara Cole, law school graduate, promising career ahead of her. What had transformed that woman into Amara Cole? Professional ghost, living in his building and cleaning his floors. What kind of fear made someone erase themselves so completely? And more troubling, why did he care so much about the answer? At 2 p.m., Amara arrived for work exactly on schedule, her face carefully composed, the exhaustion from last night buried under professional competence. She wore simple black pants and a grey sweater, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. She looked like every other housekeeper in every other luxury building in Manhattan. Invisible by design. But Jae-Hyun saw the tremor in her hands when she set down her bag, the way her eyes scanned the penthouse, like she was checking for threats, the tension in her shoulders that spoke of a sleepless night. "Good afternoon, Mr. Park," she said, her voice steady, her gaze fixed somewhere past his left shoulder. "I apologize again for last night. It won't happen again." He wanted to ask her about Chicago, about Amara Cole, and what had killed that smile, about the blonde woman following her through Hell's Kitchen, about the coffee shop that wasn't on her route. Instead, he said, "We need to talk. Sit down. Welcome back, besties. This is Afro-Korean TV stories. And honey, buckle up because this story is about to take you on a ride you'll never forget. If you're ready for danger, obsession, and a love story that'll have your heart racing, you're exactly where you need to be. Drop that like, share with your girls, and subscribe, because trust me, you need to see what happens next. And yes, kindly tell me where you are watching from." Her eyes finally met his, sharp with alarm. "Mr. Park, I'd really prefer to just get to work. I have a lot to catch up on. Sit down." He gestured to the white sofa that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Please." The please seemed to surprise her more than the command. She sat carefully, perched on the edge like a bird ready to flee, hands folded in her lap. Jae-Hyun remained standing, maintaining the height advantage, but kept his distance. She was already scared. He didn't need to add intimidation to the equation. "How long have you been in New York?" he asked. You know how long? 8 months. Before that, her jaw tightened. Mr. Park, my employment history is in my file. If there's an issue with my work, there's no issue with your work. Your work is impeccable, but your file is fiction. He watched her face carefully, cataloguing every micro-expression. Amara Cole didn't exist 3 years ago. The references you provided don't check out when you dig deep enough. The person you were before you became my housekeeper is a very well-constructed ghost. The colour drained from her face, leaving her skin ashen. She stood abruptly, and he could see her calculating distances. To the door, to her bag, to freedom. Fight or flight. And flight was winning. So, I should go. I'll clear out my apartment by tomorrow. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Sit down. His voice was softer this time, but no less commanding. I'm not firing you. I'm trying to protect you. She froze, confusion replacing fear. What? Last night, you were followed. Professional, tail. Knew how to stay invisible. Tracked you from Hell's Kitchen to 2 blocks from this building. Blonde woman, late 30s. Expensive taste. He pulled out his phone, showed her the surveillance image. Do you know her? Amara stared at the photo, and something in her expression shattered. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. The kind of recognition that came with history, with wounds that never quite healed. Her hand drifted to her mouth, fingers trembling against her lips, and for a moment she looked like she might be sick. Lena, she whispered. Oh God, she found me. Who is she? Amara sank back onto the sofa, her professional composure crumbling completely. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable. The armor she wore daily, stripped away to reveal the frightened woman underneath. Someone I used to know. Someone I thought I'd left behind. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mr. Park, you need to fire me. Right now. If she knows I'm here, if she knows I work for you, then you're in danger too. Everyone around me is in danger. That's why I disappeared. That's why I became no one. Jae-Hyun moved to the bar cart, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and brought one to her. She took it with shaking hands, stared at the amber liquid like it held answers, but didn't drink. He sat down beside her. Not too close, but close enough that she'd know he wasn't running. In his world, information was currency, and she was about to make him very rich or very dead. Either way, he needed to know. Tell me, he said simply. Why? Her voice cracked on the word. Why do you care? I'm just someone who cleans your home. You could replace me tomorrow and never think about it again. That's what smart people do. They cut their losses and move on. I've never been accused of being smart in the ways that matter. He took a sip of his whiskey. Let the burn center him. And you're not just someone who cleans. True, you're someone who sees everything and says nothing. Someone who walks through my life like a ghost, but somehow makes it feel less empty. Someone who was late for the first time in 8 months, and it made me realize I've been waiting for you every night like some pathetic fool. The confession surprised them both. He'd meant to stay clinical, detached, but the words had escaped anyway. True, and raw, and dangerous. Amara looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Recognition of a different kind. The acknowledgement that they were both people who'd learned to survive by never letting anyone see them clearly. And now they were seeing each other. And it was terrifying. Her name is Lena Cross, Amara said finally, the words coming slowly, painfully, like pulling glass from a wound. We were friends once. Best friends, actually. We met in law school, studied together, built our careers together at the same firm in Chicago. She was brilliant, ambitious, and completely ruthless in ways I didn't see until it was too late. What happened? I found out she was stealing from clients. Big clients. Important clients with mob connections and offshore accounts. She was skimming money, hiding it in shell corporations, building her own empire while using the firm as cover. When I confronted her, Amara's voice broke. She took a shaky breath, forced herself to continue. She framed me, made it look like I was the one stealing, planted evidence in my files, forged documents with my signature. Within a week, I was fired, blacklisted, and facing federal charges. Jae-Hyun's hand tightened on his glass. How did you get out? I ran. Before they could arrest me, before the indictment came down, I took what money I had and disappeared. Found someone who specializes in making people vanish. Cost me everything I'd saved, my entire life. New identity, new history, new face in the digital world. I became Amara Cole and tried to be invisible enough that she'd never find me. She laughed bitterly. I guess I wasn't invisible enough, and now she's here, in New York, following you. Jae-Hyun stood, his mind already running through scenarios, calculating angles. What does she want? What she's always wanted. Control, power, money. Amara finally took a drink, wincing at the burn. If she found me, it means she knows I'm the only person alive who can prove what she did, which means she's either here to silence me permanently, or she's here to use me as leverage for something bigger. Or both. Or both, Amara agreed quietly. She set down the glass, stood, straightened her spine in that way she did when she was rebuilding her armor. Which is why I need to leave. Tonight. I'll disappear again. Go somewhere she can't follow. You've been kind to me, Mr. Park. Kinder than you probably realize. But I won't let my past destroy your life. You didn't sign up for this. I'm signing up now. The words came out firm, final, the same tone he used when declaring war on rival syndicates. You work for me. You're under my protection. And no one, not your former friend, not federal agents, not God himself, takes what's mine without consequences. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Lena isn't some street thug you can intimidate. She has connections, resources, powerful people who owe her favors. If you go after her, she'll destroy you. Jae-Hyun smiled then, cold and predatory, the expression that made grown men confess their sins. Then she's welcome to try. I've built my empire by destroying people who thought they were untouchable. Tell me everything you know about Lena Cross. Her connections, her habits, her weaknesses, every detail, no matter how small. Mr. Park, Jae-Hyun, he moved closer. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough to catch that floral scent that had haunted him all night. If we're going to war together, you should probably use my name. She stared at him, and he could see her fighting with herself, torn between the survival instinct that said, run, and something else. Something fragile and desperate that wanted to believe someone might actually fight for her instead of abandoning her to the wolves. This is insane. You barely know me. I know you're precise, careful, that you fold my newspapers in thirds before recycling them because you notice that's how I read them. I know you water the plants on Thursdays, and that you hum when you think no one's listening. I know you rearrange books by color instead of author because it makes you happy, even though you know it drives me crazy. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know that 8 months ago, a woman walked into my fortress carrying ghosts I couldn't see, and somehow made it feel like a home. So no, I don't know your whole story, but I know enough. Amara's breath caught. For a moment she looked like she might cry or laugh or run. Instead, she did something that surprised them both. She leaned forward, rested her forehead against his chest, and let herself be held. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Years of fear and loneliness pouring out in waves. Jae-Hyun wrapped his arms around her carefully, like holding something precious and breakable, and realized with absolute certainty that he would burn the entire city down if it meant keeping her safe. Outside, Manhattan continued its relentless pursuit of more. More money, more power, more everything. Inside the penthouse, two people who'd spent their lives being untouchable discovered what it meant to finally let someone in. It was terrifying. It was reckless. It was probably going to get them both killed. But for the first time in years, Jae-Hyun Park felt alive. "We're going to need a plan," Amara said finally, her voice muffled against his shirt. "I'm very good at plans." He pulled back slightly, tilted her chin up so she could see the promise in his eyes. "And I'm even better at eliminating problems. Lena Cross made a mistake coming here. She thought she was hunting you, but now she's in my city, threatening what's mine. That makes her prey, not predator. What are we going to do? First, you're moving up here. Tonight. Your apartment is too exposed. You'll stay in the guest suite until this is over." He was already mentally rearranging his world, calculating what needed to happen to keep her safe. "Second, I'm calling Victor back. We're going to find out everything about Lena Cross, where she's staying, who she's meeting with, what she's planning. Third, we're going to flip the script. She thinks she's controlling this situation. We're going to show her she's already lost. And then we give her a choice. She disappears and never comes near you again, or she disappears permanently. Her decision." Amara searched his face, looking for something. Doubt, maybe, or the realization that he was in over his head. She wouldn't find it. Jae-Hyun Park had survived 2 decades in a world where weakness meant death by being absolutely certain in his convictions. And right now, protecting this woman had become his most certain conviction yet. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Really, why risk everything for someone like me?" He considered lying, giving her some pragmatic answer about assets and investments and strategic value. But they'd moved past that somewhere between last night's lateness and this afternoon's confessions. So he told her the truth, simple and devastating in its honesty. "Because for 8 months, I've watched the clock every night, waiting to hear your key in the lock. Because you make me remember what it felt like to be human before I became this. Because when you were late last night, I realized I'd rather fight the whole world than spend another evening wondering where you were." He cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "Because somewhere between hiring you and tonight, you stopped being my housekeeper and became my reason to come home." The kiss happened inevitably, like gravity, like dawn, soft at first, tentative. Two people who'd forgotten how to be vulnerable remembering together. Then deeper, urgent, with a kind of desperate hope that came from finding light in unexpected places. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amara was crying again, but this time, she was smiling too. "We're going to die, aren't we?" she said, half laughing through her tears. "Probably." Jae-Hyun smiled back, rare and genuine. "But at least we'll die interesting." Outside, the sun began its descent, painting the Manhattan skyline in shades of fire and blood. In another part of the city, Lena Cross was making plans, confident in her power, certain of her victory. She didn't know yet that she'd miscalculated, that the invisible woman she'd been hunting had found something worth fighting for, that the ruthless syndicate head, who owned half the eastern seaboard, had just declared war for the most dangerous reason of all. Love, it turned out, was the most expensive thing Jae-Hyun Park had ever purchased, and he was prepared to pay whatever it cost. The penthouse fell into comfortable silence, the kind that existed between people who no longer needed words to understand each other. Tomorrow, they would plan. Tomorrow, they would fight. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. But tonight, for the first time in years, neither of them was alone in the dark. And that, somehow, felt like winning. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Subscribe, drop a comment telling me what you think happens next, and hit that like button